Subaru's Impreza brings four-wheel drive traction within the affordable reach of family buyers who neither want or need any kind of SUV. It's a conventional, focus-sized family hatch with very unconventional engineering, with a standard, symmetrical all-wheel drive system mated to Lineartronic auto transmission and a pair of uniquely configured petrol boxer engines. This 5th generation model gets a more sophisticated chassis, a smarter interior, improved media connectivity, and class-leading standards of camera-driven safety kit. Despite that, it's still not a package likely to suit everyone, but it'll perfectly suit those in search of something more seasonally capable and just that little bit different in this segment.
Let's imagine this. Your home is up there, and every year during the colder months, your little family hatchback struggles up it. Sometimes though it doesn't, and you have to abandon the thing at the bottom and walk with the kids and the shopping. Now the obvious answer is to get one of those small SUVs with four-wheel drive, but you haven't done that because you found that one of those will be very expensive, both to buy and to run. Clunky to drive too, and just a bit over the top for what you actually need. Perhaps what you actually need is something like this, the Subaru Impreza. Here is the 5th generation version launched early in 2018. As you can see, this isn't an SUV, it's not even one of those trendy crossover models you see so often these days, cars that seem to promise four-wheel drive capability but usually don't deliver it. No, for someone in the situation we've just described, this is instead a means of affordable family transport that delivers everything you need and nothing you don't. Now, aside from hot hatches and pricey premium brand models, it's the only C-segment family hatch you can buy that delivers its power to all four wheels. Yet, on paper at least, there seem to be few compromises to make for that kind of all-weather capability. Now true, it isn't particularly cheap to buy, but you'll be paying no more than you would be for a well-specified version of a similarly sized two-wheel drive Focus, Astra or Golf class rival, and getting yourself a tougher, more durable product, which is now a much more sophisticated one too. This Mark V design is pretty much new from the ground up, the grounding point in question being a stiffer, more sophisticated global platform that Subaru has apparently spent over $1 billion developing for all the mid-sized models we're likely to see from the brand in the near future. Now these underpinnings have allowed the development team behind this car to deliver far higher standards in terms of on-tarmac ride, refinement and handling, and those are all areas in which previous versions of this car rather struggled. They were let down too by rather plasticky cabin design, so that's also been hugely upgraded and embellished with a state-of-the-art infotainment system. And Subaru is now claiming Volvo-style standards of safety, thanks to this car's included eyesight package of camera-driven safety systems. In addition, the engines are basically all new, both of them petrol powered and as standard mated to the company's smooth Lineartronic automatic transmission. They're still of Subaru's unique boxer configuration though, that hasn't changed. Plus, you get a lot of extra standard features that you'd have to pay extra for if you were going to choose a rather more conventional obvious rival. So, does it all add up? Well, that's what we're here to find out. If for you the idea of a Subaru Impreza conjures up images of World Rally Championships, sonic blue paint, gold wheels and big spoilers, then you'll certainly no longer be target market for this car. The WRX STI contender you're thinking of was part of a model line separated away from humbler Impreza variants back in 2008. Since then, the Impreza badge has designated an unassuming, modestly performing, petrol-powered 5-door hatchback, notable only for its unique provision of all-wheel drive. You might wonder whether such a thing is really still needed in an era marked with the proliferation of rugged, compact SUVs. Subaru probably did too, but in other markets at least, the Impreza name has such a strong following that the company couldn't resist continuing this model's bloodline on into this 5th generation version. Now at first glance it doesn't seem to serve up a very different recipe to what went before. Same flat 4 boxer engine, same CVT auto gearbox, same symmetrical all-wheel drive system. Bear with us though, because radical changes really have been made here. These come courtesy of the very different chassis this model now sits on, the so-called Subaru Global Platform. Now compared with the underpinnings that were used before, it's 70% more rigid, allows for even lower centre of gravity, and it can reduce body roll by up to 50%. As so many other brands have found, when you get this starting point right, it's very much win-win from there. Take that issue of body roll for example, and that's a significant one with a car like this that features a relatively high ride height. With a stiffer platform you can use stronger suspension mounts and dial out a lot of the usual pitching through the bends without the need for springing that's so firm that the driver will feel every bump in the road. In this case, that's additionally helped by a rear stabiliser directly attached to the body, further eradicating excess movement. A stronger chassis structure also means less creaking and better refinement, and it's obviously much safer. And the reduction in the vehicle framework's lateral bending, in this case an astonishing 90%, means the car will perform better at different angles on a bumpy track. So does it all make a real difference on tarmac? Well, absolutely yes. Turn quickly into a tight bend and you'll find plenty of grip, and a body now more resistant to the kind of lurching forces that in the older model would have seen rear seat occupants cursing your ham-fistedness. It further helps that the Impreza's previously rather vague steering system has been retuned and reweighted, so you can better feel what the front wheels are doing via a setup that now responds far more quickly to minute corrections. The 5mm drop in ride height this time around doesn't hurt either. Of course, lighter and more agile front-driven Focus class rivals will always have the edge over this Subaru in terms of tarmac drive dynamics. What's important this time around though is that the Impreza gets much closer to that standard, which is quite an achievement given that this model has to lug around a heavy all-wheel drive system. Yes, now the symmetrical all-wheel drive system, and we should say a bit more about that because it's such a primary selling point. Four-wheel drive systems in family cars are almost always part-time setups where the vehicle runs front or rear driven most of the time, only adding in all-wheel traction after grip's been lost with the road surface. With Subaru's symmetrical system, you have a simple, balanced, permanent distribution of power to all wheels at the same time, and that can stop traction being lost in the first place. Torque is distributed with a 60-40 bias to the front, and there's no user input needed, so no buttons to press. Of course, you shouldn't suppose from any of that that this is any kind of off-road tool. There isn't either the ride height or the underbody protection for that. But for country dwellers who dislike SUVs and who live at the end of an unmade track or up a steep hill, say, we'd say that this car might be just about perfect for motoring in the colder months, especially if such buyers are prepared to invest in a set of winter tyres. You'll be wanting to know about engines, which, as we said earlier, are the usual units that Subaru specialises in, flat 4 boxer power plants, and they're normally identifiable by their deep, gravelly thrum. Now, some elements of that aural signature have been dialed out a bit this time around, and that will please those who prioritise refinement, but it'll slightly disappoint others, including ourselves, who felt that the previous distinctive aural signature was one of the things that really made a Subaru a Subaru. The engines available this time around are a couple of FB series petrol units that the company's had in their portfolio for some time. There's an entry-level 1.6 and the 2-litre unit that we're trying here, and they're both offered only mated to Subaru's usual Lineartronic automatic transmission. Now that's because you have to have an auto box for Subaru's clever eyesight camera-driven safety package to work. Now fortunately, the Lineartronic setup is one of the better belt-driven autos on the market, and it's the only one of its kind that's been developed for use in an all-wheel drive car. Subaru hasn't significantly altered the transmission for this 5th generation model, so as before it offers 7 simulated gear ratios that 2-litre buyers get to flip between using these steering wheel mounted paddle shifters. Instead, the engineering effort has been devoted to those 2 engines, 70% or more of their parts being completely new. Now in both cases there are higher compression ratios and much lower levels of internal friction, hence the quieter noise levels I referenced earlier. They don't offer any real extra performance though, which the base 114 PS 1.6 litre model really needs. Its modest 150 Nm torque output necessitating plenty of shunting around between the virtual ratios if rapid performance is called for. To no great effect either, 62 miles an hour occupies 12.4 seconds from rest on the way to 112 miles an hour. And that's why almost all Impreza buyers plump for the 156 PS 2-litre variant that we're trying here. Now though the torque improvement to 196 Nm is pretty small, the performance on offer will be far more acceptable to most likely buyers. The acceleration sprint time is enhanced to 9.8 seconds and the top speed is raised to 127 miles an hour. Even here though, the petrol CVT auto combination isn't on paper ideally suited to the creation of the kind of capable tow car that some potential buyers might be looking for, and that's absolutely the way it turns out. No Impreza can lug along more than 1,200 kilos. Still, if that's enough, you'll certainly find this Subaru a far more capable proposition than obvious rivals, thanks of course to that symmetrical all-wheel drive system. It defines the car, and it always has. The look of this 5th generation Impreza model has evolved into something a little classier and less ruggedly sensible, but it'll still be pretty familiar to those who know their Subarus. Those who don't will find a smart but unremarkable 5-door hatchback body shape that this time around is 10mm lower and 35mm wider. Up front you get the brand's usual Hawkeye headlamps, but for this Mark V model they've gained full LED technology and these neat outer daytime running light strips. The familiar central hexagon grille is now more smartly detailed, as are the lower chrome trimmed corner cutouts that house the standard fog lights. Plus you get these sharp creases that run the length of the bonnet in an attempt to express a sense of stability. From a side perspective, a previous buyer might note that the design's built on the proportions of its predecessor, but with sharper lines that are focused towards the rear. Straight upper and lower crease lines blend with curvier wings, and those are contoured to emphasise the wheel arches. Those are sculpted in a way that hints at this Impreza's all-wheel drive capability. And they house standard 17-inch alloy rims, which are 1 inch larger than the wheels fitted to the old car. Overall, it's certainly a much more appealing profile, and it's aided by this raked back windscreen and the way that the roofline falls gracefully towards the rear. At the rear, the lamps are positioned to jut out from the shoulder line on the body where the profile lines converge. Corner reflectors mark out the outer edges of the lower rear bumper, and further up, above this smart privacy glass, there's this neat roof spoiler. Of course, what's rather more important is the stuff that you can't see, and in this case that is very significant indeed. Now the 5th generation Impreza gets the billion-dollar Subaru global platform. That's also shared with the company's 2nd generation XV mid-sized SUV. That chassis is a massive improvement on the previous model's rather crude underpinnings. As a result, the body is now 70% more torsionally rigid, and it's 70% better at resisting lateral bending forces. The rear subframe is claimed to be 100% more rigid. Now those are impressive figures, although they do rather make you wonder about the solidity of the previous design. Time to take a seat up front, at which point you'll notice the standard keyless entry system and the door-mounted touch sensor that operates it. Now let's be frank, the cabin of the previous version of this model felt pretty down market by modern standards. This interior might not immediately bring to mind premium brand standards of quality. Some of the switchgear is still a bit cheap looking, but overall it's a huge improvement, and that's thanks to copious use of soft touch plastic and nice touches like this silver mid-level trimming strip that extends into these carbon fibre style panels around the door pulls. Someone at Subaru has finally realised that the showroom interior experience the car can offer is just as vital to selling it as any engineering technology it might have. In this part of the interior, the cabin is 29mm wider than the previous Model 2. Perhaps the most important development, though, lies with the changes made to the centre dash infotainment screen. Now, this sits higher up the fascia than before, it's grown in size to 8 inches, and it uses a far classier interface. As you'd expect, it's the portal from which you can access the 6-speaker DAB stereo system and the usual phone and media features, although not any kind of satellite navigation setup. And that does seem odd, given that you can have that feature on this car's XV crossover design stablemate. Still, in compensation, the screen incorporates smartphone mirroring for Android Auto as well as Apple CarPlay, so you'll be able to download and use navigation apps as well as a wide range of others. AHA, for example, which will enable you to stream music, information, social media and other data services. You also get voice control, smartphone style pinch and swipe functionality and a standard fit rear view camera which offers a super wide 160-degree field of view behind the car when you're reversing. Other manufacturers would also build the various vehicle informational functions you'll need into such a monitor, but Subaru continues to prefer to separate these into a smaller colour screen at the top of the centre stack there. Now, from this now smarter display, you can oversee the various eyesight safety systems, plus there's a clock, a compass, trip computer readouts, and a useful screen that shows you the ongoing status of the symmetrical all-wheel drive system. Now, anything that both these main monitors can't tell you will probably be covered off by the further screen that sits between the two clear instrument dials that you view through this tactile 3-spoke multifunction steering wheel. Now, this covers off things like fuel usage and tyre pressures, plus it includes a digital speedo. As before, there's enough wheel and seat adjustment to make it easy to find a comfortable driving position on these well-sculpted chairs, and they feature standard heated upholstery. And we continue to like the way that the heater controls are large and chunky enough to be used by a gloved hand. Cabin stowage, that's reasonable. Now, the door pockets do look a bit small, but they have been shaped to allow for the placement of large bottles. The installation of this electronic handbrake switch just below the gear stick here, that frees up space for a couple of horizontally orientated cup holders, and there's a coin tray just behind those. There's also this lidded storage box between the seats here, and that comes complete with a 12-volt socket and a DC 5-volt USB port. And there are more sockets. There's a 12-volt, there's a USB and an aux in this stowage area just ahead of the gear stick. There is no overhead compartment for your sunglasses, but the glove box is big, and there are also small trays in the door armrests. Time to take a seat in the rear. Now, these long doors open wide for easy access. Once you're inside, you feel the benefit of this generation model's 25mm of extra wheelbase length. There's 26mm more legroom than there was in the previous version of this car, and that means that current Focus class standards can be matched in this regard. Knee room's pretty decent too, and that's aided by the prominent inverted curve shape adopted for the front seat backs. As usual in this segment, 3 adults can only be accommodated at a squash, but thanks to 36mm more body width this time around, a trio of kids will now be fine, and a pair of fully grown folks should be able to make themselves comfortable on all but the longest journeys. Raise the rear hatch and you'll find a 385 litre space. That's 5 litres more than before. Now, that's more than you'll get in a Focus, and it's similar to the capacity of a Golf, but it's well behind what you'd find in some other class contenders like Skoda's Octavia. Nevertheless, Subaru reckons that what's provided is quite sufficient. They claim that this trunk will accommodate 5 suitcases from 5 seated passengers or 3 golf bags. They could be right. There's no option for an adjustable height boot floor, but it's certainly a very accessible space, and that's thanks to a boot opening that's 100mm wider and a boot floor that's 41mm deeper. That obviously makes it easier to load in heavier or taller items like bikes or pushchairs. The small underboot floor compartment doesn't yield much extra room. This lower space is made possible by the fact that, rather disappointingly, for such a capable four-wheel drive hatch, Subaru doesn't provide any sort of temporary spare wheel, just one of these fiddly tyre mobility kits. There's no 12-volt socket either, although you do get the usual bag hooks and tie-down points. Now, if you push forward these 60/40 split folding rear seat backs, the load area revealed isn't totally flat, but it is as spacious as most owners will need it to be. It's 1,275 litres in size. The basic buying formula here is fairly straightforward. Were you thinking of a compact 5-door family hatchback, something Focus or Astra sized? Perhaps with petrol power to keep the upfront asking price down, and with a plush level of spec? Well, here, for the same sort of money that a well-equipped choice of that sort would cost, you can have much the same thing, but with standard automatic transmission and the all-important addition of all-wheel drive. Now, in a country with as many rainy days a year as ours, that last feature is an extra attribute well worth having. Now, we talked in terms of this Subaru costing much the same sort of money as plushly equipped versions of more familiar two-wheel drive Focus classed hatchbacks. In this case, that means asking prices starting at £24,000 for the base 1.6 litre Lineartronic version of this car. Most buyers, though, opt to find another £1,000 to get the 2 litre Lineartronic model we're trying here. Either way, there's a single 5-door hatch body style and a single very well specified SE level of trim. Now, in terms of discussing the value proposition those kinds of figures represent, we have to start by talking about this car's exclusivity. Now, yes, there are compact SUVs with four-wheel drive that could cost slightly less, but these would deliver less space for luggage and rear seat folk, along with clunkier handling. Anyway, the whole point here is that Impreza customers don't want an SUV. If you narrow your focus towards other compact family cars, you'll find that if you want something relatively affordable with four-wheel drive, your options are pretty limited. Now, unless you're prepared to consider a wild hot hatch or top four-wheel drive versions of Audi's A3, BMW's 1 Series or the Mercedes A-Class, which many won't be, given that models like that sit in the £30,000 to £35,000 bracket, there's no other Focus-sized family hatch you can buy that even offers the option of four-driven wheels. Now, this has forced most of the press into trying to compare this 4x4 model against two-wheel drive family hatchback rivals. That is a bit unfair, but let's try it anyway. For a fair comparison, you're going to need to be looking at a top-spec automatic version of a Focus, an Astra or a Golf, or whatever else it is you fancy in the family hatch C segment. Do that and you'll find yourself looking at a price that's actually pretty close to Impreza levels, and all applicable to a car that will certainly have only two-driven wheels, will give you nothing like the same standard safety provision, and which will probably have a much shorter warranty. Subaru's asking figures here would also pretty much buy you a comparable premium badged hatchback in this class, say those BMW, Audi and Mercedes models we mentioned earlier, but with a posh brand at the £25,000 price point, you'll not only have to do without four-wheel drive, but you'd also find your car lacking the really plush level of equipment that's served up here. Bottom line? Well, as you'd have gathered, the unique selling point here is all-wheel traction. If you don't buy into that, then you probably won't buy into this car. But let's say you do. Let's say all-wheel traction is important to you. Maybe you live in the country, or perhaps your daily work or school-run commute takes in roads that can rapidly turn treacherous in the winter months. Now, for you, this car's USP makes perfect sense. Indeed, it's possibly something that you always wanted, but you are put off from having by the high prices and the questionable fashionability of the compact SUVs that perhaps seemed to be the only option when it came to the need for a compact family car with 4x4 capability. All of that may lead you to decide that ultimately there's just nothing quite like the Subaru Impreza. And if you reach that conclusion, well, then you'll be wanting to know just how generous this Japanese brand has been when it comes to this car's standard equipment levels. And the answer is that you shouldn't be disappointed. Now, we mentioned earlier that there was only a single SE level of trim, and it's very generously specified. Now, the kit list runs to full LED headlights with auto activation and high beam assist, front fog lamps, heated power folding mirrors, UV protection glass, which is privacy tinted further back, rain sensitive wipers, wiper de-icers, headlight washers, and a Thatcham Category 1 alarm immobiliser. You get alloy wheels too, of course, with 17-inch rims. Inside there's dual zone air conditioning, a keyless access system with a push button starter, heated front seats and cruise control. Plus there's leather for the gear stick and the multifunction steering wheel. There's a rear view camera too, and that is some compensation for the fact that front and rear parking sensors are notable by their absence. Go for the 2-litre engine and you get steering wheel mounted gear shift paddles too. Also standard is the Subaru infotainment and audio system with its 8-inch colour touchscreen. That's the portal via which you access the 6-speaker DAB stereo system and use the Bluetooth phone functionality. This package includes Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring, voice recognition, a CD player, dual USB ports and an aux-in jack. Rather surprisingly, what isn't included with this premium Starlink package is satellite navigation. You can't have this feature as an option either. It's all very well for Subaru to point out that smartphone mirroring allows owners to access navigation through their handheld devices, but that's not going to help you if you need to find somewhere and you're in the country without much of a phone signal. It won't do anything for your phone carrier data charges either. Whichever of the two Impreza variants you choose, bear in mind that unless you want your car in the standard crystal white pearl finish, you have to pay extra for one of the various pearl and metallic shades that the brand offers. We've got pure red here. Plus, of course, you can talk to your dealer about the usual tow bars, roof racks, roof boxes and roof carriers for skis and kayaks. Now on to safety, and this is an area where big strides have been made with this 5th generation design. Now a major failing with the previous design was that it hadn't been engineered to incorporate the latest camera-driven safety kit that buyers increasingly now expect. This Mark V model emphatically puts that right, moving from the bottom to the top of the class in this regard. That's courtesy of Subaru's impressively complete package of EyeSight driver assist technology, all of which comes fitted as standard across the range. Now the brand has now produced over 1 million EyeSight equipped vehicles, and a recent study by the Institute for Traffic Accident Research and Data Analysis in Japan found that Subaru models fitted with EyeSight were 61% less likely to have an accident than those without it. Look in detail at how the system works and it quickly becomes clear why that is. This setup uses 2 stereo cameras, one mounted either side of the rearview mirror, to monitor the road for up to 110 metres ahead as you drive. These are then used to capture 3-dimensional colour images that are nearly as sharp as those seen through the human eye, hence the system's name. Now that extra accuracy makes quite a difference. Other similar cam-driven safety systems can only recognise upcoming hazards as vague, unidentified obstacles. In contrast, the EyeSight cameras can specifically recognise vehicles, motorbikes, bicycles, pedestrians and lane markings. As a car moves closer to the potential hazard, the EyeSight setup takes an image from each camera and compares those images to determine your closing distance to the object. Software decisions can then be made in the blink of an eye to either warn you to take avoiding action or to autonomously apply braking, so the accident can either be completely avoided or its severity significantly reduced. Well, that's basically how the EyeSight autonomous braking setup works. Subaru calls it pre-collision braking, but 5 other systems are also provided as standard on this car using that EyeSight technology. So let's run you through those. Now at highway cruising speeds, adaptive cruise control will automatically regulate your distance to the vehicle in front. Lane keep assist will apply gentle steering correction if at over 40 miles an hour you're about to deviate over the road lane markings. Lane sway and departure warning will give you visual and audible warnings if the car gets caught by a gust of wind or departs its lane without indicating. lead vehicle start alert will prompt you if you're stopped there in a traffic queue and you haven't noticed that the vehicle in front has started to move. And pre-collision throttle management will warn you if you select drive instead of reverse when the car's facing an obstacle, say if it's parked facing a wall, and it'll cut the engine to prevent an impact. And there's more. All Imprezas also get Subaru's rear vehicle detection system package, which includes 3 more key features. Blind spot detection works on the move if you're just about to pull out in front of another vehicle. Lane change assist works on the highway to warn you if another vehicle's approaching the rear of the car in a neighbouring lane. And rear cross traffic alert warns you of approaching traffic when you're reversing out of a parking space. It's all very reassuring. We should also make the point that this 5th generation Impreza is also a fundamentally stronger and safer car than it was before. Body strength has been increased by 40%, allowing the chassis to absorb more energy in the event of a collision and disperse it more widely beneath the seating compartment. In addition, all Imprezas now get steering responsive LED headlights which turn with the bends and which dip themselves at night in the face of oncoming traffic. Now, the result of all of this has been a string of safety awards for this Subaru around the world, and as expected, it's gained the full 5-star rating by independent assessors Euro NCAP. Plus, of course, the previous model's full suite of more traditional safety features has been carried over. A little disappointingly, European spec models don't get the pedestrian protection airbag, which is standard on Imprezas sold in Japan and some other markets, but you do of course get the usual front, side and curtain airbags, plus there's a driver's knee bag. And you'll find the usual electronic aids for traction and stability control to hopefully ensure that you never have to use them. There's a brake assist feature built into the 4-sensor, 4-channel ABS system, and that maximises deceleration in emergency stops. And hill start assist is also included to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. A safety pedal setup prevents foot injuries and crashes, and there are also anti-whiplash head restraints and ISOFIX child seat fastenings. In short, it all adds up to a very complete safety showing that most rivals in this class just can't get close to matching. You don't fit 4-wheel drive to any compact family hatchback, especially a petrol-powered one that has to have automatic transmission, and then expect class-leading running costs. It just can't happen. Now, in this Subaru's case, there's also the issue that previous models have tended to be on the heavy side, and that virtually all have featured boxer engines with a reputation of being rather fond of a drink. Now, this kind of perspective isn't helped by lazy journalists who don't compare like with like and unfavourably compare the returns of an all-wheel drive, petrol-powered, automatic Impreza with those of 2-wheel drive, manual gearbox rivals. So in analysing previous versions of this car, we've always tried to take these things into account, and when we've done so, we've usually found that the figures returned weren't really that far away from the class norm. This kind of real-world showing ought to be usefully enhanced by this 5th generation model, thanks primarily to a lot of work that the Subaru engineers have done on those 2 petrol boxer power plants. Now, these are both lighter by up to 14 kilos, and they feature a higher compression ratio and lower levels of internal friction. The 2-litre unit that we're trying here also gets tweaks which increase airflow into the cylinder, so achieving a better mixture and improved fuel efficiency. Factors such as a relatively light body shell, slippery aerodynamics and the efficient CVT auto gearbox also all help the Japanese brand's cause, as does an auto start-stop function that cuts the engine when you don't need it when you're stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. But enough with the background detail, let's get to the figures. The 1.6 litre Lineartronic model manages 44.1 mpg on the combined cycle and 145 grams per kilometre of CO2. For this 2 litre variant, the readings are 42.8 mpg and 152 grams per kilometre. Now, we'd understand if you didn't find those returns to be especially eye-catching, but you have to put them into perspective. The class average for a petrol-powered automatic two-wheel drive family hatchback of this size with this kind of power is a combined cycle fuel return of just over 50 miles per gallon and a CO2 reading of just under 125 grams per kilometre. So that means you're looking at a running cost increase of 10 to 15% to get the winter peace of mind of an all-wheel drive Subaru. For many potential owners, it'll be a price well worth paying. Bear in mind too that running costs aren't just about fuel and CO2 readings. This Subaru will deliver higher residual values than some of its competitors. After 3 years and 60,000 miles, the car is predicted to be worth 31% of its original value. And in the case of this 2-litre model, that'll be around £7,500. Insurance groups are reasonably competitive too. You're looking at Group 12E for the 1.6 litre petrol model and Group 18E for this 2-litre petrol version. What else? Well, we like the multifunction display that delivers self-check maintenance alerts and which enables you to track your fuel efficiency, even allowing you to compare the frugality you've achieved on different trips. More pointlessly, it records how long the stop-start setup has been active on any given journey. Servicing intervals are every 12,000 miles or every year, whichever comes around first, and there's a peace of mind of a 5-year, 100,000 mile warranty that embarrasses the 3-year, 60,000 mile package that most rivals offer. You also get a 3-year recovery and roadside assistance program that you'll almost certainly never need. Subaru can draw on a long tradition of solidly built, multi-purpose all-wheel drive cars. In fact, it's sold 15 million of them, more than any other manufacturer. The issue though in this segment is all about packaging and presenting that clever engineering in a way that's accessible and appealing to mainstream customers. This 5th generation Impreza makes a much better job of doing that. It's certainly improved in a lot of areas that might have put you off the previous generation versions of this car. So media connectivity is now properly up to scratch, the eyesight safety package is arguably class leading, and handling is much better thanks to this Mark 5 model's much stiffer, more sophisticated global platform. Plus, as before, you get the feeling that an awful lot of development and effort has been put into making this a longer lasting, more durable choice than the other more conventional cars you could choose in this segment. Of course, if you don't really need 4-wheel drive, then as before, the charms of this Subaru will almost certainly still pass you by. You'll question its slightly higher running costs and the restricted model lineup. Even then though, you might still value the winter peace of mind and the dry weather grip delivered by the clever symmetrical all-wheel drive system. Ultimately though, this Impreza will remain a rare sight on our roads, and that'll suit likely loyal buyers just fine. They'd prefer this car to be a well-kept secret, a supremely sensible choice in a country where rain's forecast on over 160 days each year. So what if it's a non-conformist choice with a cabin that fights the fashionable trends and a distinctive boxer engine spinning away beneath the bonnet? What matters is that ultimately there's nothing else quite like it.